Good evening and welcome. This evening I'm making a cheese board using cherry, maple, purpleheart, walnut, and even a little bit of alder. All of this is a very good, dense hardwood that can be used for cutting boards, charcuterie boards, serving trays, cheese boards in this case. That's exactly what this is. And even wood coasters. So, welcome, and I hope you enjoy. So for this cheese board, we're doing this at approximately 7.5 inches wide by 15.5 inches long. This is the initial mock-up stage, and if you notice, I left most of these pieces fairly long. The idea behind this is that once I have glued everything together, I have a little bit of slack left over that I can take to my table saw and square it up completely. So here we go for the gluing stage. If you'll notice, I have a clamp on one end and on the other. Once the glue is placed and I start clamping everything together, I'll put another one on the bottom through the middle and then a couple more on top for a total of 5 clamps. Now what you have to be careful of here is that when you glue things together, if you put too much pressure, you're going to cause this to bow and it's going to have a little bit of a valley in the bottom. To prevent that, just make sure that everything is glued together evenly and the clamping pressure is 100% even. That way, when you go to put it through your planer, if you have one, you want to minimize how much you take off to make everything nice and flat and flush. So now for the messiest part of the project is the glue up. Now the glue up, you want to spread it as evenly as you can. All these pieces from the purple heart, these 2 pieces of maple, and this cherry are turned on their side. That way I can glue each one individually, turn them 90 degrees, and then put them together. And then I will do the same for this piece of maple, walnut, this other piece of maple, and this alder. So now I've put the glue on. You just smear it across so you get a nice easy coat. And some people use those little glue rollers. I've tried them. They're okay, but honestly, you don't get as much coverage when you're doing a board this size. It makes it kind of difficult. So now you just, again, smear the glue, spread it across, and I know some of you in the comment sections are going to say that my camera work isn't all that perfect. Well, guys, bear with me because I'm doing this as a one-man show right now. I don't have the money to hire somebody as a professional videographer to do this for me. But as you see, glued, turn them 90 degrees. So now I can do these last 4 pieces, and then it's time to squeeze everything together with the clamps and move on. Okay, so now the 2 end clamps are attached, and I've started to tighten it down. Now you notice the squeeze out. It's not as prevalent as you would see on other boards because there's a lot of different heights on this. And when I run it through the planer, that's when I will get my desired thickness. Okay, so now everything's clamped together and we get to come back in the morning to finish it up. Okay, so now the glue up process is completed, and we've let it sit for quite a while. So the glue is good and cured. Now comes the process of removing the clamps and preparing to send this piece through the planer. Okay, so now we've gone from an uneven surface after everything's been glued together, and having run it through the planer, now it's flush and smooth. Prior to sanding, we want to make sure that everything is 100% squared away. We're going to cut these tail pieces off and square it up here and here using a radial arm saw. Then, to check square, we'll measure each side, here, here, and here, and here, and here. And if it's a little off square, I'll run it through the table saw and get it 100% square. Okay, so a couple of things need to be mentioned here. Not a lot of people still use radial arm saws, and there have been some reasons behind it. My personal opinion is that the accidents that have happened with people in the past is because they were not paying enough attention. A machine like this is incredibly dangerous if you do not know how to use it. When I got my saw a few months ago, it came with this kit that included a blade guard to protect you from potential injury. That's not saying that you are 100% foolproof. So you need to be incredibly careful when operating a machine like this. Now, having said that, the table saw can be just as dangerous. So again, pay attention to what you're doing, and above all else, safety is paramount. I cannot stress that enough. If the machine's too loud, get earplugs. But always, regardless, always wear safety glasses. And I know that sounds crazy, but your sight is the most important thing. And if you love woodworking as much as I do, you need to have good eyesight. And if you lose that, you won't be able to do it anymore. So that's my little tip on safety. Okay, so now the board is in position to be cross-cut by the radial arm saw. Now, a trick that I use is I will bring the blade up as close as I can to make sure that I'm taking off as minimal amount of wood as possible, because I want to preserve as much as I can to have the right length. So, here we go. Okay, here we go with this cut. So now I'm going to take the saw and slowly pull it across. Okay, now for the other side. And now, as I mentioned, now we have a squared edge on each end for the board. Okay, so our next step is a little bit of sanding. Now, these pieces right here are from another project that I did, and you see a lot of people using specialized little bolts or something to elevate the board or whatever you're working on and lift it up a little bit. I figured these work just fine. So I'll show you how they're set up here in just 1 second. Okay, so now I've set the little triangular pieces as an elevated base to set the board on. Keeps it clear of the bench, and now I can start sanding. I'm using this sander with about a 320 grit, simply because the planer did a really good job of getting this roughed in, and honestly all it really needs is some finishing touches. Once I sand it, I'm going to spritz it with some water to really bring the grain out and make it stand and pop. I'll dry it off, and then I'll sand it one more time before I put mineral oil on it to finish it. Okay, so now comes the fun part. Spritz it with a little bit of water and make it stand out. Okay, so now we're ready to do the final pass or two to sand it off before we round the edges with a router and then oil it. Okay, so now we've sanded this off, and I've used a 320 grit. Typically what I like to do is almost like a vacuum cleaner pattern, going with the grain, okay? And I usually like to hit it about 10 times, maybe 20 times, back and forth, and just really get this thing smooth. To the point where, as one of my daughters said, this is so smooth that it makes a baby butt feel like sandpaper. Now, having said all of this, some people have preferences on making their boards where you take and you can round the edges with a router. In this case, I'm not going to do that, but some of my other boards I have done that. So I'll do that in another video and show you how it's done. But for now, our next step and final step is to put some mineral oil on this. Now, folks, I am not being paid in any way by any of these companies that I talk about, like Craftsman or Delta for my planer or any of my other tools. So please keep that in mind. But I do have to say, this Howard cutting board oil is phenomenal. I've been using it. I'm on my second bottle of it. You get it from Home Depot for about 10 bucks. Fairly reasonable, and it works great. It really makes everything stand out. So now it's time to add some oil and start the process of finishing the board. Pour some on, spread it out with a paper towel. And some people use the rollers and the brushes and all that. I guess a lot of that is preference. Right now, I haven't bought any of that fancy stuff, so we're just going with something simple and generic. Get a roll of paper towels from a dollar store for like $1 or $2. And honestly, that's really all you need. So now I'll get the ends, the edges, the bottom side. We'll let it sit for about a day or two to let it cure up, and then I'll put a little bit of a wax finish on it, and that's that. Okay, folks, here is how it looks after it's been oiled. And again, I will let it dry up and sit for quite a while, probably about 24 hours to let it finish. Now, for those of you who are interested, I will be uploading this onto my page, and you will see the link below in the video description to my Shopify page. This particular board is going to my dad as a Father's Day gift. It's a cheeseboard. Dimensions are about 7.5 wide by about 15 inches long. I hope you all enjoyed this, and if you have any questions, by all means, please reach out in the comments below or contact me on my Shopify page. Thanks for now.